Hello and welcome to this video, and this video is going to be called I Think Meg White is a Great Drummer. Right, and then you'd probably say by a professional drummer or something like that. With me trying to prove my credentials as a professional drummer, whatever that means. I'm actually sat here in a different location. I'm in the live room of Studio One at Lode Street Studios. This is where I do a lot of my recording, a lot of my sessions. This is where I'm recording stuff with my band Nataraja at the moment. We've recorded the Law of Three album here. And anybody who's gone into a studio like this and made an album will be aware of the challenges that come with trying to make a really great record. And I'm going to be getting onto that in a little while. But first of all, what has motivated this video? It's a little different from anything else I normally do. Well, I'm pulling up an article from musicradar.com, and it's called Jack White Pays Tribute to Meg White as Journalists Apologise for Kicking Off Viral Debate with Petty Obnoxious Drumming Tweets. Right, let's get a little bit deeper into that, shall we? Jack White has put a poetic cap on the raging social media storm about White Stripes drummer Meg White's playing, following a tweet now described by its chastened author as ill-advised, nasty and totally unjustified and just plain wrong. Political journalist Lachlan Markay, right? So what are his credentials to talk about music? I'll tell you what they are. He's a normal person. He's not talking about politics. He's a normal person just talking about music and giving his opinion. And we know what opinions are like, don't we? Lachlan Markay landed himself in hot web water by claiming that the White Stripes would have benefited from the percussive services of, to quote, a half-decent drummer. Yeah, I've heard all but it's a carefully crafted sound man takes, wrote Markay, instantly digging himself out into a corner. I'm sorry, Meg White was terrible, and no band is better for having a shitty percussionist. Right, that's what he wrote about Meg White. Right, now I'm going to set the record straight, okay? If you go looking for virtuosity, like technical virtuosity, being able to perform difficult things, you know, rudiments and speed and odd time signatures and all that type of stuff, don't go searching it within rock music, right? The greatest drummers on the planet are session drummers. They are drummers or percussionists that work in orchestral ensembles or have a jazz background. Those guys are like 10 times better than any rock drummer. The best rock drummers in history had some of that in their playing, all right? And the more that you know, every now and then you fluke, say with a band like Toto, you fluked a proper studio crafted session guy in that band, and I'm pretty sure Jeff Porcaro could play whatever he wanted to play, you know. But Jeff Porcaro was a certain beast. He was a certain type of drummer. Neil Peart is a certain type of drummer. Okay. Virgil Donati is a certain type of drummer, and Ringo Starr is a certain type of drummer. They're all doing different things because you have to understand that there's all sorts of different music out there. This is what makes music great. There's all sorts of different music, and that music requires all sorts of different instrumentalists to play and make and create it. All right. One of the big stumbling blocks for musicians who are starting out is the demons, and the demons tell themselves, or do the demons tell them? It's both, really, isn't it? The internal demon will turn around and tell the musician, "You're not good enough," and it will also tell them that even if you were good enough, the competition is too great. But this is not the way music is made. If you think music is made like that, you've got the wrong end of the stick. Right? Music is this vast amount of stuff that does all different things. You know, some music is there to dance to. Some music is there to cry, you know, when someone's left you and listen to the lyrics that make you feel better. Some music is to rouse you to a revolutionary fervour. Some music is to worship to. Some music is to shop to. Some music, you know, is to drive along in your car to. You know, some music is to sit there and assuage your anger while you sit in the queue for half an hour, right? This is what music does. And when someone makes that music, there's a different intention behind that music every single time, right? Technique, which is what this guy's criticizing Meg White on. Technique is the method a musician used to achieve the aesthetic result, which varies across the board. So there's all this different music and there's all these different techniques. Now, physical skill, actual skill, again, that differs, okay? So as a drummer, you might have a drummer that's great at reading music. You might have a drummer that's incredibly fast. You might have a drummer that's got a beautiful sound, or they might have a unique sound where you can recognize them, right? You may have a drummer that has incredible time, or more importantly, incredible groove. Bernard Purdie used to turn up to a session and used to put 2 signs up outside his kits, either side of his kit. And this was in a recording session, and the first sign said, "Congratulations," and I think the second sign said, "You'd hire the hit maker." Back in those days, a drummer could take it to #1 because people would hear the groove. All right? Now, when I hear the White Stripes, that's partly what I hear, are these incredible grooves. But I want to tell you a story, a personal story. Back when I was playing with Robert Plant in 2000, I was in a room with him and he asked me to come up with a drum beat. Now, I do have a lot of technical chops. I know all my rudiments and my odd time signatures, and I'm pretty fast, and I can play around the kit, and I can play lots of different styles. And he was asking me to come up with a beat, and I was trying everything I could. But I realised that it wasn't those technical skills that were required now. It was my interpretational skills that were required. Now, as much as I'd had a lot of experience playing in different covers bands and playing difficult music, playing progressive music and fusion, I had nowhere near Robert's experience of making records. Right, records operate and exist in a completely different realm, and all the attributes make a hit record, right? If you put down sit down and listen to any hit record, any famous record, you will notice that every single thing in there is a hook. It's not just the vocals that make hooks, right? If you think of "Don't Bring Me Down" by ELO, that starts off with the drum introduction, okay? That drum introduction was created by one of my best friends, Bev Bevan, all right? Now, Bev, I've sat next to him, and Bev has a signature sound. He has a sense of groove, he has a time, and he also has an approach to the way he creates his beats relative to what's going on. Many a time when I've been working with him, I have seen him architecturally starting to create a beat which is simple, accessible, which you can tap your foot to, but it will also define that track, a signature beat. At the beginning of a "Don't Bring Me Down," that drum beat that comes in is not only a mixture of Bev's feel, the way he plays it, the way he places it so you can recognise it, but it's also the engineers and producers. They've had an artistic role, and the drummer is working in the studio. In a place like this, you're working with the producer. I'm coming into here to do a session tomorrow with my with a dance group called Soul Central, and I'm bringing an engineer in. Most of the work is going to be trying to create the sound of the drums and get it right for the track. Once I've got that, I'm probably going to put the track down in probably 3 or 4, 5 minutes, right? But Tim, the producer that's asked me to do this, he's also sent me ideas of sort of beats he wants to do. So what I've got to do is I've got to try and create that sound, create the vibe and groove that he wants, because it's basically a dance record. And I need to come up with a signature beat which is not straight, but is not fussy. It just sort of defines what we want. That is the difficult thing. That's the thing that I feel is the challenge. Will it be the hardest thing I've played? No. Will it have the most technical, hardest, patterns in? No, it won't. Right? The challenge when you go into a room is to come up with that beat that integrates in the track and enhances the track. And in most cases, the drummer, what the foundation that they're creating, which the track is sat under, is the building block of success. So there we have Meg White in the studio with a drum kit in front of her, recording Seven Nation Army. Seven Nation Army has not just been a hit record and sold a ton, it's become a seminal track. Okay, I teach kids right down to 8 or 9 years old. And when they come in, they want to play a handful of songs, okay? They want to play Enter Sandman by Metallica. That song does not go away. They want to be able to play Paranoid by Black Sabbath. That song does not go away. But at the top of the list, is Seven Nation Army. Now, why is that? I'm sure the critics are saying because it's so easy to play. It's just a riff and a beat. And yes, it is. But how many simple riffy tracks have been made? What makes this track so special? Right? What did they do right? There's a magic there. There's a mystery there. And that is an unbelievably talented thing to be able to pull off. To be able to go in and just with less, just with a couple of chords and a rock beat, create something which is hooky, accessible, and means something to so many people that it goes through history and changes our culture. Right? Now, you probably thinking now, yeah, but Meg White just played along to it. Anybody could have just played along to that record and it would have been a hit record. No, that does not happen. Nobody just plays along to it, right? So if you imagine when the riff comes in, she goes ba ba da 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 da. Right? She doesn't go ba chicka chicka ba chicka chicka ba chicka chicka ba boom boom ba. Now that might be a little bit harder to play, a little bit more choppy, a little bit of funkier. But I think if you'd have done that, it would have destroyed the track. Right? As the riff progresses, there's like a 3 against 2 feel. Ba 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. That bit there, and I'm not quite sure how she picks it up, but she just manages to pick that bit up. Most drummers would not have done that. They would have played all the way through. Every time I hear that track and she just picks up that 3 against 2, which is actually quite difficult to do. But, da, that's a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, that 3/2 polyrhythm. Now that 3/2 polyrhythm comes from African music. African music is the bedrock of blues. It's the bedrock of jazz. Jack White understands that history going right back to Blind Lemon Jefferson and Charlie Patton. He understands that. And this track has a swampy swing that takes you right back to the beginning of the blues. When people hear it, they hear the blues. And Meg White's very subtle, pushing towards a 3/2 polyrhythm, which is the same thing that jazz swing does, is very, very clever. The drum sound she's got, the way she's hitting the drums, they're expansive and full, right? That's very difficult to do. If you've got bad technique and you're choking the drums when you hit them, in other words, you're stiff and tight, when you're hitting them, you're going to alter the way that the head vibrates. Anyone can hit and come off the things, relax. And I think it's because she's actually playing quite quietly, and the engineers have been able to come and pull that sound out because she's not destroying the sound of the kit by hitting it so hard. By hitting it quietly, she's allowing the drums to sing. I hear all this. When I heard the White Stripes, this is how I saw it. I thought, here's a band which is basically guitar and drums. That's difficult. And they're making records that are just having huge hits. That's really, really interesting. The drummer, how are they doing that? How are they making that interesting? In a lot of the cases is that because Meg White is creating signature drum beats, and she's creating signature drum beats by actually doing less. Where a normal drummer would be going ba chicka ba ba da ba chicka ba do digibon can. That's what I would have been doing. But she is actually using perhaps her technical, the technical's the wrong word, her physical skill deficiencies. She's using that in a really interesting way. Now let me get across to you this. As I said at the top of this, if you go looking for virtuosity in rock bands, you're looking in the wrong place. That is not what rock bands do. Rock bands create incredibly accessible, emotive, exciting music, right? And the musicians that can do that because they have a signature and a sound. If you're a session musician, you're hired to disappear, right? But if you're Meg White in the White Stripes, you have to be Meg White in the same way as Phil Collins when he does that big fill is Phil Collins, and the same way as John Bonham when you hear that thunderous drum sound is John Bonham, and the same way as when you hear on Ticket to Ride Ringo go boom, bladder, boom, blah, blah, boom. Again, that 3-against-2 polyrhythm. You know, when you hear that and you go, oh, that's Ringo. That is what makes rock bands, right? The greatest rock bands, when they come on the radio and you haven't heard that track before, you go, oh, it's AC/DC. I know it's AC/DC because of these signature things that everybody is in the band is doing. That is the magic, all right? This politician or political commentator that tweeted this, he knows nothing about music. The general public don't know anything about music. They're beautiful and they're wonderful because they devour it. They're the audience. They're the ones who buy it and they're into it. Loads of people have bought into the White Stripes. That's why we're talking about them. They're wonderful. But often when they try and form opinions about it, these opinions are based upon so much misinformation and a lack of understanding of how music's made, because they've never considered sitting in a room like this with a bunch of musicians and having nothing and creating something and the skills that are required to do that. And believe me, it is not these technical physical skill things that make great records. It's something else, and I've tried to get that across on this video of what that is. I, as a drummer, have always been fascinated by the limits of what's technically possible on the instrument. You know, when I was a kid, I wasn't one of those guys that just wanted to join a rock band and bash out a rock bit. I started there. I started with Motorhead and AC/DC and all those bands. But my journey was, I got more interested by Rush and then Yes and then the Mahavishnu, then Miles Davis, John Coltrane. That was my journey into music. I was interested in these more denser, you know, ways of playing. Then I started to make records. When I started to make records, I realised records were made in an entirely different way. And I had a number of revelations about this, about the fact that in some cases, the drummer's job is to disappear. It's to not shine at all, to not sound like you're doing a good job at all. Some days, what you have to do is just disappear. Some days, the audience wants drumming. They want to hear something fiery and explosive. That's what you've got to deliver. You know, sometimes people want character. Sometimes, and this is the biggest thing that a musician can bring to a project, and I'm going to tell you now, all you musicians watching this, the most important thing that you can bring to a project as a musician is love. All right? Meg White brings love to that track. That is what makes great tracks. If you walk in and you look at the artist and you think this artist is trying to express something, and what they're trying to express, they're trying to express their emotions. They're trying to reach another person in the hope that something positive will come out. That's what you hope they're trying to do. In most cases, they're just trying to show off and be famous and have some credit come back on them. And that's the big problem with the music industry. But if it's true, they're trying to communicate something. And if you come in and say, look, I am here to help you communicate that thing as best as I possibly can. I once had advice from the great Kenny Aronoff, one of the greatest session drummers in history. And I said, can you give me some advice about, you know, doing sessions? And he said, yep. He said, look at the lyrics, right? And work out the story. He says, because you're making a film when you go into a studio. And he says, the artist is the lead actor, the producer is the director, the songwriter is the script writer, and he says, you've got a bit part in that film. He says, ask yourself what the bit part is and then commit to it. Commit to the meaning and show them this. And so I can remember going to the next session and saying to the singer-songwriter, oh, can I have a look at the lyrics? I start to read through the lyrics, and their face was, oh my God, the musicians are actually interested in the emotional content of the song and wants to try and get that across. All right? Us musicians, we're too obsessed with perfectionism. We want to get everything right, but the listener doesn't hear that. They hear a balance between perfectionism and emotion, and the emotion has to be in there as well. And sometimes not having true technical brilliance and everything being nailed. Sometimes those edges, those things where someone's feeling what the song is about, right? The vibe of the song. And when they feel that, all those little mistakes, embellishments, you know, things that aren't quite on the grid, sounds that aren't right, that express that because the person is expressing their love at that time of the situation and the people in that room. That is what makes great music. I'm so glad to be able to use Meg White as an example and explain what makes great music. Seven Nation Army is a fantastic track by anybody's account. So you may like it or may not like it, but it's a very important track in music history. And we should be celebrating the musicians who are capable of doing this, because not many can, right? And Meg White can. Okay, thanks for watching this video. If you like it, like it. If you want to hear more, subscribe. And if you want to go deeper into what I do here, then please get on to my Patreon and pay me some money every month to get a ton more content so I can do this, you know, more, because I want to do it more. Okay, I'm finished now. Thanks for Low Street Studios for having me here. There's going to be a lot more coming from this place in the future, so keep an eye out for that too. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.